it started with dreams and ideas and things that were bubbling up from my subconscious. And then at some point, figuring out, going on this mission to figure out what I was trying to tell myself. This one was one that I started very early, really as looking at it as a producer as well, and saying, okay, well, this is, obviously if this movie gets made, it's not going to be a huge budget, and so let's mine the things that work that don't require a huge budget. That is, so that's why I put a lot of the horror and the scares in the dialogue, in the performances, in the moments, in the ideas, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to do any sort of sweeping, huge monsters or any kind of thing like that. So it was all very, this combination of strategy and gut inspiration. And you need both. And it took a long time because it was, weaving these things together. Part of the process for me was, was following the fun, and for me that meant inventing a secret society. I looked at, well, cool. I'm at this point where now I get to invent this secret society organization. So I did all this research about the Knights Templar and the Freemasons, and sort of created this timeline for what this organization was up to, what they were doing, and I also knew that even though that would never make the movie, it would inform so much about the movie. So, I think the short answer kind of comes back down to that. What's my favorite movie that hasn't been made? I'm just constantly asking myself that.
This project didn't start as a statement. It began as me wanting to make a film in my favorite genre. And I sat down and I would smoke a little bit of weed and try and write a mind-bending horror film, my favorite genre. And at some point, I just followed the truth.
You tease the audience, you play with our expectations and upend our foregone conclusion of what's going to happen. Can you tell us about that?
Well, that, comedy is where I'm from. And the process of doing sketch comedy, week after week on Key and Peele, very much became about this idea of jujitsu, of judo. If you can predict where an audience is going to go or what they think you're going to do, you can use that momentum against them. So that, all over this movie, I knew I wanted to have reveals. I knew I wanted to have twists, but most importantly, I figured if an audience thinks they know what's going on, and whether they like it or they don't, if you can show them that they've been watching something completely different the entire time, I think they have the respect. And there's a real intellectual catharsis that comes with that, and it's fulfilling for an audience. So, there was a while, the real big one in this, there's a few big ones. There's the Rose reveal, which, it was a very difficult thing to hide that Rose was evil. Because, it's like, you look at on paper, she's bringing him there. To expect an audience not to think that is almost impossible. So I had to kind of direct her and write that, as if it was a different movie. As if it was this love story, and to, try and convince the audience to just root for the two of them to escape together, or to think at its worst something is going to happen to one of them and the other one. That was one of the most fun reveals to protect. But I think the big one was to subvert the expectation that the type of racism we were watching was going to be, what we usually associate as racism. That this was going to be an exercise in a hateful demeaning of this black person, and that it would be somehow built on this idea of white supremacy or superiority. And so, and the movie was kind of about that for a while, writing it. And then some moment I sat down and I said, what if we took these interactions that we were seeing in the garden party, right, where the microaggressions, I do know tiger. What if we took that and what if I didn't say, what if I explored the actual horror of that dynamic and took that one step forward? And I ended up at something that also rang very truthful, which is this putting that which the black body and the black identity can give these people, but still not take the souls.
In the writing of this, how do you separate the crafting the narrative and building the drama versus the integration of all these ideas, making social commentary that you're talking about? How many drafts does that take?
A lot of drafts.
Hell, you started this 5 years ago, you said, right?
Well, no, I started longer. I started in 2008, 2009. I developed the story for 5 years before I put pen to paper and wrote the script. So for 5 years, this was a project that I felt like was ambitious enough that there was a good chance it would never get made. And I thought ambitious in the subject matter. The idea of doing a thriller that explores the victimization of black people.
By starting with a scene that basically is the scene we're used to seeing where a black guy disappears, he's never heard from the rest of the movie. I mean, that alone is
right.
Like a great idea.
So, well, and a terrifying idea to write, because again, I thought, no, this isn't going to pass the smell test for anyone. Every white person in this movie is evil. You can't make that movie. You can't make a movie where a black man kills a white family at the end in cold blood and the audience is rooting for him. Like, that movie doesn't get made. I had internalized this idea and said, look, I can't worry about this movie getting made. I have to write my favorite movie that doesn't exist. And so that put me on this path of working on this, and it wasn't like I was every night, I was like, no, for 5 years. It was, I allowed it to be my hobby. I allowed it to be the project that I would go to instead of watching television. That would be the most fun thing I could do with my time. And the whole purpose of it was to help me get better as a writer, because I know that from Key and Peele, when you're having fun writing, that's when you get like the East-West bullshit, where it's just, it works. Fun works. And that's kind of my advice to any writer or artist dealing with writer's block, which we all deal with. And follow the fun. Follow, if you're not having fun writing, you're doing it wrong. Shift up your tactic. I was trying to bring a piece of the conversation I'd never seen put on film before. I felt like there was this void in the way we talk about race, especially at the time when I wrote it, which was actually a very similar time to when we wrote the Obama Luther translator sketch. We felt like racism was not being called out sufficiently enough for.
How is doing scary movies similar to doing comedy?
Great question. I mean, they're both, for me, they're both about truth. If you're not accessing something that feels true, you're not doing it right. And they also, the technique of them, you have to be very tuned into the audience and their emotion. And that's why with both both forms, the technique is tension building and release. You know, when we're a teenager and all that, and we feel the most isolated. I felt, I had friends, but still felt kind of like an alien or like someone who was misunderstood. The more and more I'd be drawn to stories that explore the power of the other side, the dark side.
Mine is a terrible thing to waste. Terrible thing to waste.
You know, when I started writing Get Out, I was in a state of great fear, low in my life, and these projects have dug me out of that darkness.
And so when you're standing up the back of a cinema and you watch an audience watching Get Out or watching us, and you see them leap with fear, is that a little moment where you feel like God for that one brief second?
I can tell, I've done, comedy for, over 15 years and gotten some great laughs. Nothing really compares to the feeling of getting the audience to shudder again. There's a mischievous pleasure. You will see me in the theater laugh if I get the audience on that level.
There's a lot of therapy that goes into this moment.
There's a lot, yeah, and I don't know, something about it is that I have less of an exact science for wielding fear, as I call it. It's more of an alchemy than comedy, which became almost mathematic at a certain point. Nothing beats hearing the audience be afraid and then giggle afterward.
Cut.
Thanks,
Jordan
man.
Peele, I was really lovely to talk to you.
You too, brother.
Thank you so much.
All right.